All right, and we're back. Um, Hello everyone, I'm going to be looking at Incus OS. This time a bit less development, a bit more showing what it does and actually trying to use it. So that's going to be quite exciting. I'm slightly late for the beginning of the stream because I did a few tweaks in OBS trying to get the mic volume slightly up from normal. Just let me know if it's starting to, well, first of all, if it's any better and if it's starting to clip or anything, because that's been a slight recurring issue. So I figured I would just give it a shot and see if I can make that work any better. All right, so first gonna do just a quick update on where we're at with the project, and then yeah, try and deploy that. I've got actually a bit of details on what's going on with deploying on an actual server. So let's see. First, what's happened over the past couple of weeks? Because last week was the Incus 6.12 release, so it's not just 1 week of changes we're looking at, it's a bit more than that. So if we go all the way back from, where was it? 2 weeks ago. So that's, I think the TPM recovery key we already had in the last live stream, so we're probably kind of around there, supporting that extension. The network stuff, I think, yeah, we started to land the network stuff last time. Just give me a second, I'm gonna just mute my laptop behind me. Here we go, so we don't get noises. Right, so yeah, last week was a bit of cleanup around networking. So I think that was ongoing at the time of the last stream, and now that actually has been merged. So that includes slightly reworked structure for DNS, NTP, and proxy configuration directly inside of Incus OS. So just reworking the syntax a bit. We already had DNS, so we've added NTP and proxy. And that gives us also the space to add more things later. Like I believe I mentioned tail scale and similar options will probably come into play at some point. Now, on top of that, we've then done a bit of work. So Matthias has been doing a bunch of that in getting background updates working. So effectively having Incus OS check every 6 hours whether we've got a new version of the application, new version of the OS, and then applying that. The way it's configured by default is that application updates will be just pulled and applied automatically when noticed. So Incus itself will update. OS update when obviously not triggering automatic reboots. So on the OS side, we're instead just staging it. So like putting it on the B side if we're on the A side, and then on next reboot, you get the new version. So that's kind of how that works. Now, I've also done a bit of cleanup on the API so that all of the endpoints look the same, kind of feel the same. I might be able to show that shortly with what we have currently in a VM. And now if we go back to what we've landed last week and into this week, we've got so it's like some API cleanups. I did some still more API cleanups, effectively just aligning all of those tracks. And then I effectively completed the service piece. So I did support for Oven, the Oven service. So it starts Open vSwitch, starts the Oven controller, and provides the right configuration for both of those. And then on top of that, did some, so a bit more tweaking and cleanup, and then added the LVM service, so it's for LVM cluster. And after that, we've also added defaults for Incus. So that piece, if we go look at it a bit more closely, what it means is we've got a new flag called apply defaults, which if it's set to true or if no seed is provided for Incus, then it's gonna go and do a bunch of things, including defining a new storage pool, defining a new network. For the storage pool, it uses the local ZFS pool that we have. It also goes on to create 2 volumes, one for backups, one for images, so that it can actually configure the daemon to store those already on there. And all right, and then there is network configuration, and we make sure it listens on the network. All right. I'm just looking at the chat. There's a mention of like there's an advertisement at the beginning and of the stream. Yeah, I mean that's YouTube for you. I don't really control that whole lot. Yeah, if those who are either on an ad blocker or using YouTube Premium will probably get out of that one. Otherwise, yeah, it's just YouTube being YouTube. I think usually they do act as like an NVR type thing, so at least it lets you catch up, and then you can even go like faster than normal speed or something like extra 25% speed or something, and then catch up with the live stream. But yeah, it's not really something I've got a lot of options on my side. All right. So yeah, we set up storage network. We configure it to listen on the public IP address. And then we go on to also go through a list of certificates and trust them. That's pretty important because currently the Incus pre-seed doesn't support that. There's an issue open. There's some students working on that, but currently it doesn't. So we need that extra tiny piece to actually make it useful. Otherwise, you end up with a deployed system that you can't talk to. Not a problem for development because we can use VMs and get in through the Incus VM, but on a production system that wouldn't work. So that piece has been added now. All right. What else did we do? So effectively at the point where that commit landed, we are now at a point where it's possible to deploy on an actual system. It's not advisable, not really, but it's possible. If you do everything right, you'll have a system that will self-update that you can control remotely. All right. Then we did a few more changes this week. So one change is we've added the node exporter to the base image. The idea is that we want Incus's own metrics API to automatically chain the machine info so that you don't need to scrape two different endpoints. You just need to trust to configure Prometheus once, and then it gets both the system metrics and the Incus metrics. So that's in place, but the Incus side of the change has not landed yet. Then Matthias did a whole bunch of work this week to fix a pretty annoying problem, which was that the generated images from macOSI, they're great, but they're meant to be booted. They're meant to be on a USB stick or something that's writable, and then it can create partitions, store persistent data and whatnot. That's great, but when you're deploying servers, that is not how things work. Most servers still use a virtual CD-ROM drive, so it's read-only. And CD-ROMs are also slightly weird because they don't use a normal block size. So SSDs are usually 512 bytes. Modern hard disks are usually 4K for their sector size. CD-ROMs are using 2K. And basically, none of the servers we tested, if we fed them either a 512 bytes or a 4K sector-aligned image, it just wouldn't boot. So we had to do some tweaks, and effectively we've got now a new target that generates an ISO image, as in it uses 2048 alignment instead of 512, and that can be booted. And we've done a bunch of changes, like Matthias did a whole bunch of changes to Incus OS so that it can detect that it is on a read-only system. It can also make sure that the target system, when installed, uses the correct block size. So we've got that logic. That was most of what's happened so far this week. And then kind of related to that, a couple of small issues is the support for booting a read-only system made it so that it was now possible to boot Incus OS on a system without a TPM, but things would go really wrong afterwards. So now we've added a detection logic for kind of system requirements. So if you boot on a non-TPM system, the Incus OS UI, the text UI we have, will immediately tell you like your system doesn't meet the base requirements. Sorry, that's it. So instead of kind of pretending to work, but then not having persistent storage and you start using it, but then when you reboot, you lose everything. So we've effectively had to do that tweak. And that's basically where we're at. So if we look at the most recent build that I did yesterday, I believe, we now have most of those files we already had before. So debug.ra, incus.ra, those are the two applications. That's fine. We had those before. EFI GZ, that's the EFI partition. That's mostly useful for doing updates. And well, that's the EFI file actually, not the partition. So that's useful doing updates. That's the UKI. And then we've got the three partitions themselves, again, used for updates. And then we've got the images for installation. So image.gz, that's the one we always had. That's the one that's meant to go on a writable USB stick. And that works as usual. And then we've got an iso.gz, which is meant to go on a read-only media on a 2K aligned storage device, as in a CD-ROM. And that will then run the installer. All right, so that's basically where we're at. Now, obviously, given the title of the stream and what I shared on social media, the idea is to try and actually install this thing for real. There's a small snag to that. My plan was to reinstall the production router for NorthSec because I need that router reinstalled anyways. It's currently on Ubuntu 22.04, I think. It needs to be reinstalled. So my plan was to reinstall it. So I got it connected to network. It's got 80 gigabit connectivity, like dual 40 gig. I got its BMC going. I got everything working so that I could show you that and then do the install. But then I noticed it doesn't have a TPM chip. So we can't actually install to that platform, unfortunately. It does have a TPM header on the board. So I did order a TPM, but it's going to be arriving tomorrow. So this is not going to be, that's not going to work on that machine. Then I went to look at our lab and I was basically thinking like, well, okay, that router doesn't work. Let me pick another modern server that we can use. And so I looked at our 3 AMD Epics. And again, none of them have a TPM. They all have the header, but none of them come with a TPM. And apparently 3rd gen Epic, at least, doesn't have an FTPM on the server chips. That might have changed with 4th and 5th gen Epics, I don't know, but at least on 3rd gen, it's not there. So also not an option. So within the lab, the only machine that I have that would work out of the box is one of our Intel test machines. That's a 13th gen Intel platform that does have a TPM, but it's also not super exciting because it's effectively an Intel NUC type platform. I don't have a good way to show the screen remotely. It's not great. So my plan is to kind of cheat and just do the demo with a physical system, just not a server. And then tomorrow when I get a TPM chip, I will go and do the exact same thing on that machine because I did do a boot check. It boots the image just fine. Everything is fine. It says the network card, everything's good. I just can't install it because it can't actually create the persistent storage due to lack of TPM. That's also why we did that commit to actually immediately complain now so that it's very clear what's going on because the error I was getting was not super clear. I quickly figured out what it was, but I also know exactly how IncusOS works. And if I didn't, I would probably have gotten pretty confused. So anyway, the idea is to just use the machine behind me. Let me check what the camera looks like here. Yeah, we can't really see anything, can I? Okay, let me just hold it up. There we go. I'm just gonna install on this thing. So this guy is, where's the camera? Camera's here, there we go. So this guy is just my old laptop. Nothing too fancy, but because it is a modern, not modern at all actually, it's 7 years old, I think. So it's an old X1 Carbon 5th gen, I think. So that's just dual core 4 thread. I think it's got 16 gigs of RAM. It's pretty old. So that's my old laptop, but it being a ThinkPad meant for enterprise, it definitely has a TPM chip. So that's gonna be what I'm gonna be trying. It also has a config that's actually kind of similar to the server I want to install to. It's got half the RAM and half the CPU than the server I want to install this thing on, but it also has single SSD. It's mostly fine. That will still let us show how everything works. And then I can redo it on the actual system tomorrow. So the first thing we're gonna need actually, so for that laptop is I'm gonna be using a USB stick. I'll actually do that on the server as well because Supermicro's virtual media is not fun. I tried to make it work with like uploading the ISO and everything, and it would need like a Windows share, like a Samba or directly a Windows server that's publicly accessible so it can map and then get the file. And at that point, I just gave up. I'm like, I'm just gonna use a USB stick. It's fine. So I've got a 32 gigs USB stick. Here, we're gonna be downloading the image, and then the more important part is actually we need to create the right seed so that when this thing deploys, it's actually usable afterwards. So that's kind of the main trick to this. So let's plug this thing in. All right, so I've got the USB stick plugged in, and now let's look at what we need to do. So in this case, I'm gonna need the image for the USB stick. So that's the image.gz. And actually talking about the seed, there's a piece of work that's open, and I think Matthias is gonna be looking at that shortly, which is this one, implementing a flasher tool. So we want to have a Go binary that you can just download run that asks you whether you want USB or CD-ROM, and then asks a few questions around networking, Incus initialization, etc., so that it just spits out a resulting install image you can use. I'm gonna do it the old-fashioned way today by actually creating the seed myself by hand. But we're looking at improving that experience because that's not super user-friendly and we're trying to fix that. So looking at the terminal here, I should have our new image. I'm just gonna need to decompress it, so let's do that. And we can go and look at creating a seed. So again, that's another aspect where we either need the generator or good documentation, because right now this is slightly lacking, and even myself, I need to go look at the code to figure out exactly what we can pass in there. So we want, in this case, the install seed. So let's call it install YAML, do version 1. We want to force install true. We don't want to force reboot. And I only have one drive in this machine, so in theory, I don't need to set a target. So that should be fine as far as install. I don't need, so we've got the applications one. I don't need to use it because applications defaults to just Incus, which is exactly what I want. So I don't actually need to use that. What I do need, however, is gonna be, I mean, even network we can fix through the API afterwards. And the default network will be to just DHCP and whatever it finds, which is actually fine in this application. So what that leaves us is mostly the Incus side itself. So for Incus, that's slightly trickier. I mean, well, both trickier and at the same time not really, because I only have one disk. I don't want it to actually do any kind of weird pre-seed stuff for me. So I want the defaults to be applied because that's gonna give me storage and networking and all that stuff pre-created, and that's perfectly fine for this application. What I do need to provide are certificates. And for those, it's actually pointing me to a different place, which is the Incus API itself. So if I do that shared API certificates, what is in a certificates post? There we go. Just token. Okay, we're not gonna do the token stuff. Just checking what that was about. Yeah, so we're gonna just leave that to false and empty. So we don't need to touch those. Certificate put is what we need. So I'm gonna go back to this side, and this is a list, and do name, call it Takara, which is my machine. The type is a client certificate. It is not restricted. There's no project restriction, so we don't need to touch these two. Then there is the certificate itself. Let's try not to make any typos. Certificates there. Description, I mean, that doesn't really matter, but we might as well. Local client certificate for the car. Okay. And now we need the actual cert, so that's easy enough. Config Incus client cert. So this guy, this needs to move over here. Okay. And then just need to fix up the indent. Okay, so that's what that looks like. We'll probably have done one yeah. Let's try not to corrupt my thing. There we go. Okay, so that should be fine. So that's a preset for Incus that just says apply all the defaults, load up one certificate, and we're good. And also, like, we don't really have a reason to mess with the network. The default network stuff should be fine. My laptop has a Wi-Fi chip, so I have no idea what's gonna happen with that. Obviously, there's no way to connect it to the Wi-Fi, so I'll have wired networking into it, which is what we really want to do here. But that should be fine as far as the seed. So let's do call out seed.tar and then include both files. Here we go. And now we need to add that into the actual image. So again, we really need the flashing tool for that to do it correctly, but we can grab the right command. So that's the one. So dd if the seed.tar of is the .img file there. We need to seek to the offset of the seed partition. And then block size is 512, and we do not want to truncate the file, otherwise we would have a very bad day. So if we do that, now we've got the seed in place into that image. And at that point, we could just give it a shot. So let's create, we can put that directly on the USB stick, that will be fine. Or we can run it in an Incus VM for now and make sure it works. And if it does, then just go and apply that to the laptop instead. So maybe let's try and do that. I don't know what I'm running on this machine. Yeah, let's just wipe that VM out of there. Here we go. And we're just gonna go and create a new one. So Incus OS empty VM. Give it 4 CPUs and 8 gigs of RAM. We need to clear secure boot so that it can be initialized. Okay, the root, we want a root size of 50 gigs, and to simulate the laptop, we're gonna put it on, can I do NVMe on this machine? Maybe not. There's an issue with QEMU 10 and NVMe and Incus. I don't think I should try that because I'm pretty sure this machine is busted. So let's just do traditional .io, it's fine. The laptop will be NVMe, but that doesn't really matter. So let's do that. And then Incus OS needs a TPM. So TPM. And then we need to actually add that drive. So we can just do disk, well, let's call it install disk. The source is my home directory Incus OS. There we go. Boot priority 10. So we boot from it. And there's a chance I forgot something, but that might be enough. So let's see. It's booting up. Yep, did the enrollment, so we're good. Incus OS, VGA. Well, actually, I don't need VGA, I can just do the console. Oh, that's not good. Well, maybe it's fine, actually. It's just report complained. Okay, well, that's not good now. What happened? Crypt enroll, unlock. I mean, that's normally a TPM failure, but I passed the TPM. So what's going on? That's why it's nice to test it in a VM instead of on the actual system. because then we get to actually go have a look at what's going on. Okay, so it's complaining that it didn't find the root disk, and we saw a report issue on startup earlier. So what happened there? That doesn't matter. Those are the partitions. Can I get back high enough to pick up what report said? Can't fit requested partitions into available free space, 0 bytes, refusing. Automatically determine minimum disk size 43.2. Current image size is 3.1. Oh yeah, okay, I know what the problem is. Okay, so let me just stop that. At least when you attach it as a USB drive, it wants, that might actually be a problem with my USB stick. I don't know if my USB stick is large enough now. Anyways, so for testing, we need to grow that image. Basically, that's what it's saying. So we need to make sure that it's at least 40 something gigs, even if the space is not going to be used. And that should fix the issue. So let's try that again. But now that's making me concerned about my USB stick, because I have no idea what's the size of that stick, but I would guess 42 gigs maybe. Okay. What's it booting from actually? Yeah, the image might be kind of messed up right now because it was halfway through setting up. So that might be an issue. Let's just stop this guy. I'm just gonna regenerate the image just to be safe. So let's just get it again. I should have made a copy, but anyway, it downloads pretty darn quick. So if anyone was wondering whether this thing is ready for prime time, no, it's not. But we're getting there. All right. Just re-downloading that thing. There we go. Unpacking. I'm gonna put the seed again and grow it to the 50 gigs, which should then make it work. We've got a bunch of early initRD logic now that should let us make this thing work without needing the resize, because not everyone's gonna write this thing to like a 100 gig USB stick realistically. So I think we're gonna need to solve that one. Okay, so let's just dd the seed and then truncate up the partition to 50 gigs. Yep. The signature and everything is still fine, so in theory that's good. I don't need to wipe the VM more than that, unless EFI has like the wrong boot entry or something, which is actually quite possible. Yeah, you know what? I don't trust this guy. I'm just gonna reset the drive. So Incus rebuild, Incus OS, empty, go. Okay. All right, so we're doing the enrollment again. That's good. Now let's see what happens. Okay, didn't complain, and now we're running the install. Okay, so the issue was like a half polluted root disk that we were booting from. I could have stopped in the firmware and then forced booting from the USB stick. That would have worked around it. But this works too. Okay. But yeah, after this, I'm gonna check what the size of the USB stick is, because I'm getting pretty worried. I don't remember buying 64 gigs USB sticks. So I might need to go downstairs and pick up, I think I've got like a USB SSD that's probably like a terabyte large or something that can be used instead. Or maybe I got lucky and the last batch of USB sticks I bought were all 64 gigs somehow, but I'd be surprised. Okay, so the install is done, and we didn't put the autocomplete and reboot thing because this is meant to simulate a real machine. So we need to actually remove the drive. So device remove from Incus OS, the install drive. Okay, and the moment I remove that, we see it's shutting down and rebooting effectively. which might be an issue. Actually, it might be racing with the delete. Yeah, I think it did. Anyway, is the device gone? Yeah, okay, the device is gone now. This is why the automation doesn't do it that way. It's because on a physical system, we don't have that problem, but in a VM, we're fast enough that you can, like, just the event of removing the disk is so quick, the VM is already restarting, and that's causing us some issues. So anyways, now the VM, it installed, I removed the disk, it rebooted, I removed the disk for real, and now we're booting post-install. So it's trying to bring up the network. There we go, network is up. Yeah, okay, network is actually up now. I need IPv6, I'm on IPv6 only, so it thought it had network when IPv4 was up, but it's not good enough here. So now it's downloading Incus, installing Incus, configuring storage pool, initializing, and okay, we had an issue, illegal base 64 or something. Yeah, it's mad. Okay, let's see if we can figure out what's up exactly. It doesn't really provide too much detail. I just saw the illegal base 64 thing, but that's basically it. And let's just look at only Incus OS. It would be more useful. Okay, yeah, illegal base 64 data at input byte 0. Oh, I think I know. There's probably just like a line break at the beginning. I probably just messed up the syntax a tiny bit, and that's causing that issue. Okay, cool. Let's go and fix it. So reset that. Let's stop the VM, add the disk again, rebuild the VM, so wiping the disk. Here we go. And go to seed and look at the Incus seed. And yeah, sure enough, there we go. Fix the syntax. Oops, I need to actually recreate the tarball, please. There, recreate the tarball, delete the tarball. The image is already the right size, so there's no need to change anything there. Then we can start it, and it should go through firmware provisioning again, and then go through install again. And again, this is like a perfect example for why you want to do this in the VM first. Because if I was doing that on my laptop, I would have a very hard time debugging any of it. But on the VM, it's quite a bit easier. That might be a problem though. I'm not sure. Okay, so there's a bug there because normally following the install, let me just fix that and answer the question from the chat. But following the install, it's supposed to clean up the image, and apparently it didn't, because it looks like it's seeing persistent storage on the USB stick, which shouldn't exist. And because it's there, it's trying to unlock it, but the TPM is not in the right state, so it can't unlock it, and that's causing the error. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do the recreate the image dance again. That also means that before I flash it to a USB stick for my laptop, I'm gonna need to also reset the image again. This is a bug, so we need to actually look, I need to look at the resulting image post-install, because it shouldn't be like that. It should have auto remove the partition. It could be that it is because of the VM, like it being effectively shut down quite violently, that it didn't get to sync the data somehow, but that's still a problem. So hopefully we can fix that one. Now let's put the seed in place. Let's grow the disk again and go through console. So it should do the enrollment again. Okay, enrollment is done. And then normal console, we should see the install this time. So Jared was asking what was wrong with the YAML. I was using pipe dash instead of just pipe, and I never remember which is which, but one of the two gets you, like, counts the first line as an actual line, the other one gets you a line break. And I'm guessing I used the wrong one. That's my current guess. I'm not sure this is necessarily the issue, but very well could be the issue, that this was effectively taking the first line break along with it. And yeah, I see the comment of like, I don't remember how those pipes work. Yeah, not either. I just remember there are both syntaxes, and when one doesn't work, I just go with the other one. And given it was complaining at the first byte, it would make sense for that to be the issue. But it could be something else. Like if that doesn't work, I should actually get it through an actual YAML parser to see what's going on. Which again, the install tool will be able to do that kind of stuff and avoid those kind of mistakes. All right, so let's cleanly shut down the VM this time, so we don't have that problem again. Remove the install drive, and then start it back up. And let's see if things behave this time. So we should see the same thing, like roughly it should start, it should fail, well, it should bring up IPv4, fail to connect because I don't have IPv4 on this machine, wait for IPv6, actually successfully connect. And then install Incus, and hopefully after that we're gonna get a working install, but we'll see. Okay, we've got IPv6. It's downloading the application now. Okay, application is there, and let's see how we're getting lucky this time. Initializing, nope, exactly the same error. Okay, so that wasn't it. What is the issue then? That might be a problem. Mapper, where's the seed? Not mapper, it's in disk by parts table. Seed data there. Okay. Yeah, illegal base64 data at input byte 0. Okay. If you say so. Is there something wrong with that base64? It doesn't look wrong to me. Let me try something. So I want to actually see what we send on the wire when we add a certificate that way. I just want to make sure that I didn't mess up the struct somehow. So let me just remove my own client from in here, there, incus config trust add certificate, config incus client cert debug. Oh, well, that's the problem. Okay, so it is not a straight up PEM encoded cert. It starts with just MII, ends with IP0, which is the same content as this guy minus, so it's just purely base64 encoded DER instead of being PEM encoded with the begin certificate, end certificate. Okay, well, that's gonna be something that will probably change with the final fix for that in, I mean, I would actually argue that Incus should accept both, but anyways. All right, and I think the syntax originally with the pipe dash was actually the correct one. So I'm gonna go and fix that up. So let's go in the seed and go Incus YAML. Just drop the headers there and go back to the original syntax. We'll do that. Recreate the table, and I want to see what happened to that image. Like, did it get reset this time? No, it did not. Okay, I'm gonna need to get Matthias to look into that because the installer is supposed to delete those 3 partitions before reboot, and it didn't. So that's why we couldn't just straight up reuse the image. That's not good. I don't actually need to be root, do I? Okay, So I want to delete 11, delete 10, delete 9. Okay, not good. So instead of re-downloading the image, I'm just doing what the installer should have done. And now we can stop, rebuild, start back. And let's see if we get lucky this time. Well, that's not a good sign. Oh, is it? Never mind. It's because I disconnected the partition at the drive. So let me just add the install drive back. And that should work a whole lot better. Yep, keys are loading up. And then we should go through install. So I'm just gonna make a few notes on the side while this is going on. There we go. So make Incus accept PEM headers for certificates, because that's kind of annoying. And fix installer not deleting partitions, because that's also a problem. Like, we want those USB sticks to be reusable. Like, you don't want to install one machine and then have to rebuild it. That's silly. So we need to fix that. And we definitely used to have that logic. I think something might have gone wrong with the work on CD-ROM that might have just reshuffled a bit of the logic and caused that issue. So anyway, now let's shut that down, remove the install, and start it back up. Let's see if, what are we at, like 5th or 6th times is the charm? Kind of lost track of how many times went through the install at this point. The good thing is that the image is really small and it doesn't take long to install, so that's the very good news. Like, if you had to, I still remember the days of doing automated OS installs for Ubuntu or for Debian, where you were using a pre-seed file, and that would take just forever to go through. Yeah, that was annoying. So it's really nice that now we don't really have that problem anymore. We've got something that can install very, very quickly. Oh, crap. Yeah, that's going to be a problem. I did too many install attempts during this demo, and GitHub is rate limiting me. That's going to be a little bit of an issue. And I don't know if the rate limit based on just the IPv6 address, because if they do, that's very, very easy to work around. I know they don't, because GitHub is stupid and doesn't support IPv6. Okay, let me cheat. So, I mean, we're gonna need to actually the VM. Yeah, let's not take a chance. We're gonna rebuild this thing. Let me just reset the installer again. So that's one thing we're working on. Like, we don't want to keep on using. Okay, well, it didn't work. We don't want to keep on using GitHub API constantly, because otherwise you might hit that kind of thing. If you run a bunch of servers, they might hit a rate limit. And I don't remember exactly how long we need to wait, but we need to wait. That's a bit of a problem. So instead, what's a website to get me my IPv4 address? Because that's gonna give me, pretty sure that's gonna give me my IPv6. Yeah, is there like a v4 dot or something? There isn't. Yeah. Let's see. Is there a server I can use that gives us the IPv4 address specifically? Okay. I mean, they say to do -4 or -6. That's not helpful for me because I'm only have v6. But sometimes those domains do have like a IPv4 or something dot. That's still the same thing. Yes, bingo. Okay, cool. So that's my public external address. Now I just need to figure out which one of my two routers is running that. It was 50, I think it was a 251. So is it this guy? That's 249. Okay, so 250 is the other router. So let's go here and shut it down. I've got fully redundant BGP routers at home. So if I shut down the second router, now when I do this, I'm getting the other IP address. Yay. Hopefully, I just saw YouTube buffer a tiny bit. Hopefully my change of connectivity didn't really trigger it too much. But yeah, now I've changed my external IP address to my other IP. So let's go through the install again. I'm hoping I can get away with 2 installs, so doing this one and doing the actual machine before I get rate limited again. Oops, I forgot to put the install drive again. Let's just add it back. And yeah, it might be the first time you see someone just like shutting down their router while streaming. But hey, that's, I mean, what fun is it having properly redundant BGP routers if you don't, shut them down sometimes? So, yeah, that probably did cause like a few packets to get dropped just as VRRP was shoving traffic over to the other one, but that's fine. So I'm just hoping that GitHub is throttling based on the actual IP address and not based on like the parent subnet or something, because otherwise I'm still gonna be throttled, but hopefully not. And there's like the normal workaround for GitHub throttling is that if you use an authentication token, then you don't have that problem. They only rate limit anonymous, completely anonymous queries. But I don't really want to have to bake an authentication token inside the images. So for now, we're just hoping people don't get rate limited. And the goal is to switch to our own image distribution server, so just having like a static web server running that stuff instead, at which point there won't be rate limits. So that's the plan. All right, let's see. So this time, hopefully YAML is correct. I've got a new IP address, so GitHub should like me. And the install went through, so there's a decent chance this might work, maybe? Guess we shall see. Okay, that's normal, IPv4. Okay, now we've got v6. Yay, downloading. Okay, so the API did let us through with the other IP, so that's good. Okay, and now let's see, starting application, initializing. Please, 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 please. It didn't fail, so I think we're good. Let's try that. Yeah, and we see a Incus bridge just showed up with like its own subnet and stuff, so that's good. All right, so if I remove my usual Incus OS remote and add a new one, so Incus OS, and the IP is 172.17.250.8. Yes, I'm trusted. That's good, that's what we like to see. And if we go look at storage list, we got a storage pool and everything is good. So that worked. And that also means I can now query the OS part of the API. Here we go. As mentioned, we've got a few more services now. So the services endpoint has scsi, LVM, oven, and NVMe. Yep, that's where all of those. And on the system side, we can query the network config, so that's fine. There's actually a message here saying encryption key has not been retrieved yet. So you need to go and retrieve that. So if you do system encryption, that gets you the recovery key for the encrypted storage, and that clears the warning from the UI. So yeah, well, we're looking good now. So next step is to try that on an actual system. Now, my question was, how large is my USB stick? As in, did we get lucky? USB stick is apparently that Debian install media, 28 gigs. So the answer is no, didn't get lucky. This is not large enough to install on. Let me check if I've got another stick around here, otherwise I'm gonna have to go down to the basement to grab that external SSD thing. No, I do not have another disk here. So give me 2 minutes, I guess. I'll go grab this thing. I think I know where it is, so hopefully it's gonna be quick. Should probably mute the microphone. There we go. Be right back. And I'm back. All right. So that should be a bit larger. Let's see. Okay, so plugged it in, and let's see. SDA is 119 gigs. Yay! So that's gonna work. Now I need to do the reset here. So gdisk. Okay. Gdisk of that thing, because it's still gonna have the extra partitions. We don't want those. Oops. There. Yeah, we're good. Saved. And I need to just write that on the disk. And said it's dev SDA. Yeah, go. It's gonna take a little while because it's gonna have to, in this case, copy the whole 50 gigs. So we really need to fix that. It's not gonna be particularly pleasant well, for people to do. Like the image itself is what, 300 megs of actual data, 4 gigs if you take the whole unpacked size. So having to write 50 gigs is quite annoying. Put more of a note there. Should probably have done DD just to get an idea for how far along we're at. Let's see if we can figure it out anyways. So sometimes when it's something like cat, you can go and look at its open file descriptor to know where it's at as far as reading the file. The problem is that the memory is gonna buffer a bunch. So it's reading that file. The offset is this guy. But I think that might be the end of the file. It shows 53, which if I look, yeah, so cat is already at the end of the file and it's effectively just in the kernel syncing onto the drive. So I don't really have any idea of how far along it actually is. When you use something like DD or even some other tools that read in chunk and like flush in chunk, you can use that LSOF trick to go look at what the offset is that they're reading at, and that gets you an idea for how far along in the file they are. At the same time, the drive was not clean, so like I was just thinking maybe I could have done so we're just like we could have just written the image itself, which is about 4 gigs, and then left the rest as it is. But because it's got existing data, I don't really want to risk that being a problem. So I don't know. I might still cancel it in a little bit, but like we're gonna have gone far enough as far as putting enough zeros that the installer will be happy. The problem is that I don't think canceling would work, since it's read everything and we're just waiting in kernel for the right side effectively. Because we've got an offset on the right side as well. Is that progressing? I wouldn't think so. Actually, no, it is. Okay. What's that? Okay, so that's okay. So we're at 10 gigs ish. Okay, is it moving quickly? We did between the two. We did about 400 megs something. Okay. I mean, realistically, this should be fine. There should be enough space now, enough data flushed. Let's see if we can't cancel this guy. Yep, that worked. Just gonna wanna sync whatever has been written so far. Before unplugging this guy, because I don't want things to be half written to it. Jared's asking about the cat. The cat actually freaked out when I went downstairs. I don't think he was expecting me living in my office. It was just on a windowsill, and yeah, definitely did not expect me to show up, and just like freaked out and ran away. So I'm not sure where he is now. I can go take a very quick look. Let's see. Here, look what I found. Yeah. He was just like in the middle of the staircase. Not sure why sync is taking that long. I mean, that little possible SSD is not exactly the best thing in the world, but it's still surprising. It's still syncing stuff. And the problem with sync is that you don't really get any kind of progress information. So that's like, I effectively have no idea how long that's gonna take. We know that 11 gigs of stuff were moved over. So just a matter of how long it takes to actually move that over. So let's see. Yeah, he's behaving now. Doesn't seem too scared. Was definitely not expecting me. All right. Okay, well, what can we look at while this is going on? Because I don't have any idea of how long to wait for sync. Let's just clear that up. We can just take a look at, what else we've got planned for Incus OS. Currently, there's relatively few things open. I think Matthias is looking at the 2 bugs because they're mostly smaller cleanup and things we wanted to do. The Flasher tool is kind of the next big piece, along with fixing those few issues I wrote down today. There's more API work. Like currently, we don't really have configuration for updates. It's like update policies. How often do you want to check? Do you want to apply them? Do you want to auto shut down everything and reboot? That kind of thing. That's not in there. So there's some configuration around that needs to land. Eventually, we're gonna start tackling an actual CLI tool, because currently we just use Incus query and directly poke the API. The idea is to have an Incus admin OS command that actually does that for us. That's not really made sense to do it so far because the CLI tool will be part of the Incus project. And until I'm confident that the API is not going to change significantly, we don't really want to do that. But I think we're getting closer. We've got a bit of a pattern now on how things look in general. Like if we go look at the API, Incus OS /OS 1.0. So this endpoint is not clean. That's one of those that needs to be completely changed. But if we go look at like system network, we can see it's got a config chunk and it's got a state chunk. There's currently nothing in the state, but there's the separation is there. If we look at encryption, same thing. Config is what can be changed, the recovery keys. State is just system state. And then the same is true for all of the services that also have config and then state. So there's a bit of a pattern now, which means we can probably work on that. We can probably start writing some shim, very simple commands to at least be able to show something, edit something effectively, and have that work even before the API is really finalized, so that it's easier to interact with those IncusOS boxes. There's, like, as I mentioned, more things like we need to do the plumbing for Prometheus. I'm starting to look at the work needed to get a mesh network mechanism so we can start running related services on top of an IncusOS based cluster. So that's kind of the main piece we're missing to get from standalone system to clusters of systems. So that's kind of how things are evolving. Like on the IncusOS side itself, we're getting pretty close. So as mentioned, like we've got some bugs to fix. Clearly, we don't want this install experience, like, you know, waiting for gigabytes of stuff to be flushed. That's not what we want. There's some improvements around that. There's some more tweaks to do on some of the API endpoints. Like for network, I would like to see more network state and stuff returned. So we're gonna be extending that. There needs to be probably a bit more automatic fixing type stuff. Like if I update the network config through the API and I mess up, I'm done. There's basically no way to go and fix it. So we're gonna want to fix that to have more, oh, okay, this didn't work, let's revert, okay, you're back to the previous state type thing, so that you can't lock yourself out too easily. I think eventually we're probably gonna have like a recovery image or something that you can boot your system that does give you a few more tools to fix it, and that will effectively prompt for the recovery key. So we're probably gonna end up having that as well, but not there yet. And we still need to do the integration with Operation Center. Like Operation Center is not released publicly on GitHub yet. I think we're just a few weeks away from that now. But we do have a working instance within the Future Fusion lab. So we can already have IncusOS start talking to it, pulling updates and stuff from it, which eventually will actually help with the GitHub situation, because we can, if you're talking through an Operation Center, it can download into the aggregation for you. So not all of the systems end up talking to GitHub directly, at least until we switch to our own servers for that. Okay, sync finally completed. So let's try and run this thing on an actual machine. Find that SSD is hot. I don't remember what drive is in this thing, but it's not anything good. I can tell you that. Probably some very old thing. Right. So there's Jared was saying like this on the network side, like bridging it to the physical network. So that's something we actually do automatically. As you mentioned, like on the forum, people keep struggling with that because it's like an OS level type thing. So normally, and we'll see if that's right here, it should be, the way we've, is it actually right? What's going on here? Join P5 is 0, doesn't actually look, oh, yeah, okay, it is, I think it is right. It's kind of hard to tell the type of things, but let's just check. So if we look at this class net in P5 as 0, yep, that's right. Okay, so we should actually see it better through Incus. So what we do in the config, you configure enp5 as 0. But what we do internally is we rename it to en and then the MAC address. So that's what you see here. So that's what used to be enp5 as 0. And then we automatically create a bridge that replaces it. So that means you can immediately place VMs, containers, whatever you want on enp5 as 0, because every single interface that you can define through Incus OS, through its network config, always ends up being a bridge, so that we never struggle with the whole like, oh, but what do we do now? Mac VLAN, do we create extra bridge and stuff? There's none of that, because we always create a bridge for every single interface. So we already have that up and running, so that part should be pretty easy to work with. What we might want to do is like automatically integrating that into Incus, so like actually giving it a description, marking it as managed, and making it easier to directly attach to. But right now, I could do, Debian 13 network in 5.0, and that should just work. So unpacking the image. And there we go. It's running on the host network. So yeah, we've thought that part through. That was part of the design for network management, was to avoid that kind of problem. All right, onto the laptop real quick. So let's see. I don't think I've got a super good way to show you that on camera. Let me see if I can just reframe things a tiny bit. Yeah, does it even remotely see my desk? Right, kind of. So if I move it to that corner, maybe. But my mic is also quite directional, so I'm gonna have to kind of go back and forth, I think. Okay, it's the laptop in the frame. It's kind of hard to tell anyways, because OBS is not really, I don't have a view with just a camera in OBS, and that would take a bit too long to set up. So anyway, I'm just gonna turn on the laptop, reboot it onto the USB stick, and see how that goes. I'm actually trying to reboot it so that I can stop it in the firmware, because I need to make sure secure boot is enabled, but all the keys are cleared so that we're in setup mode. And that's what we need to actually do the enrollment for Incus OS. So I'm trying to do that now. It's taking a bit of time, and I don't actually care about what's on the laptop, so I'm just about to force reboot it. Okay, so just to give you a quick update on what's going on. So I went into the firmware, I made sure that I had TPM enabled and that I had secure boot reset to setup mode, and then I booted from the USB stick, but I'm not sure what it's doing now. I'm just on the firmware screen and it's not doing much. I think like it might have done the enrollment. It just briefly restarted, which kind of looked like it might have done the enrollment, but I'm not completely sure. So I'm gonna try and restart it again and see what's going on, because it needs to boot twice and maybe it did the enrollment and then didn't reboot onto the install media and it's not trying to boot a disk that's not correctly signed or something. Yeah, not too much luck on this one. I don't want to have the stream drag on too much because obviously can't really, because of the microphone positioning and stuff, I can't really speak while I'm looking at the laptop. So that's gonna make it very, very boring for you, for all of you watching remotely. I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know if it's the USB stick that's bad, which is quite possible. Like given I can solve the DD pathway, I don't know, I might need to dump it to see what's going on, or if there's something weird going on with the laptop, because it's not showing that it actually boots from it. I turned off all of the quick boot type stuff to actually get more details, and it's literally not showing anything. If it was an EFI signature issue, it should show a access denied message, which it's not. So it's, to me, it's looking like it's trying to read through the entire disk. Oh, actually, that might be the issue. Let me just plug it back on the computer. Because the initial disk was 50 gigs large and this drive is bigger than that, the firmware might be trying to read the backup partition for GPT, which is at the end of the drive. If it does that, then that could explain what I'm seeing. So let me just try to fix that first. Not quite giving up just yet. Close to giving up, but not quite. Let's see. Okay, so it shows GPT, MBR productive GPT is present. Partitions are there. So there is a function to grow the table. I just don't remember what the option is anymore. Is it in extra? Try relocate backup. Okay, yes, we want to relocate the backup data structure to the end of the disk. Yes. Recompute. I might as well do that one too. Move. So we don't really want to move them. We want just to realign. Resize partition table. Okay. All right. Let's see what that did. Yeah, there we go. Now it shows the disk space is correct. So it shows that it does have primary, secondary, beginning, and GPT table, and it's the correct size now. So that might have been the issue. Let's see. No, so I think that was one issue, but that is not the issue. The laptop is still not performing the enrollment and actually booting up from this thing. So there's something else going on here, which I'm gonna have to figure out. I mean, outside, I'm also getting a physical TPM chip tomorrow, so I can try that on an actual server, not a whatever number years old laptop. And my plan is actually, if that TPM chip works correctly, because I just picked a random one from Amazon, then I'm gonna need to order a bunch more so that all of our lab machines have TPM chips that we can use. That did get me wondering, like, okay, should we try and do something to support non-TPM platforms? And we probably will at some point, but for any of those systems, like, they're gonna need to prompt for the encryption key on every single boot. So that's not gonna be a great experience. That's probably not something we really want to recommend right now. And yeah, we should just get the TPM based experience really working properly. Not really sure what's going on with the secure boot environment on this machine, so I'm gonna have to figure that one out. If I do figure it out, I'll leave a comment before the video gets fully published. There's always like it takes about a day for YouTube to process the recording and actually publish it to the channel, so that gives me a bit of time to cover it then. And yeah, that's mostly it. So we're at the stage where we have something that works pretty darn reliably in VMs. That's great, but we're now moving to wanting this to work pretty darn reliably on actual machines, which is where we're gonna hit a few more interesting corner cases. Like as mentioned, one of the things is simply the image sizing. We want it to be pretty small so that it's easy to write to a USB stick. That's one thing. We've got the ISO thing that we sorted out, which was also quite a bit of figuring things out and tweaking until that worked. So that was good too. And we're gonna have more of those coming in. Like, we need to figure out what's going on with this machine, which actually shows me text now. Let's see. Yeah, it's showing me an initRD type message. So it's as if it didn't do the enrollment. Like as if it completely bypassed the enrollment and just went straight to something else, which is not normal. I don't remember how much I can get out of this machine. Like some laptops, some desktops that you actually go look at what keys are loaded in the firmware. I don't think this one does, which is unfortunate, because that would be something I'd want to check to see exactly what got loaded, if anything. Because I didn't see it do the dual reboot thing. It just was stuck for a while, and then it showed the login prompt, or the failed login prompt rather. So anyway, I'll do some debugging, try to sort out what's going on with this thing, and hopefully that combined with the tool we're working on will make it a lot easier for everyone to deploy this thing, where you can just run a command, point it to a disk. We just download what we need, we write it to it, and then you get a working install media. All right, so not necessarily the success I was hoping for today, but you did get to see how to put together the seed, how to do the install through a clean VM instead of just the comments that we have, and then how that's supposed to translate to an actual install media and a real machine. Even if the real machine doesn't feel like behaving today, and the machine actually had in mind with full screen share and everything, doesn't currently have a TPM, so it doesn't really work for that. I think I can still do a live stream next week. The week after that, I'm gonna be off because I'm gonna be running NorthSec. We actually do need to have that machine set up for by then. So I won't be able to like redo the install or anything next week because that machine will effectively be running a production setup. But I'll definitely be able to comment about it. So there we go. Thanks everyone for watching. Hope this was entertaining, if anything else. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.